Get your -1 Godzilla figures at Big Bad Toy Store. Check them out at the link in the description. Today, Dragon Ball, horror, kaiju, and more. Steven's Toy Reviews. Hey there, collectors. It's going to be Steven here, and welcome to another
Figure Fight,
where tonight's fight is going to be one for the ages. The minus ages, because we're going to be taking a look at minus Goji, Godzilla 2023. We're going to be taking a look at the new upcomer from the United States, the one and the only Super7 and his Ultimates rendition. Then the tried and true Tamashii Nation's release in the SH MonsterArts line. Now, both companies have touted that they had access to the model that was used in production, and despite that the SH MonsterArts was supervised by Yuji Sakai, Super7 had the luxury of actually having the director for the movie assist with finalization of coloration and so on and so forth. Will this be the title match for the ages, or quite frankly, is this just kind of gonna be a best of the worst situation? I don't know. Go ahead and take a piss break, come on back with a snack, and kick your feet up for... it's going to be interesting one way or another, but it's going to be the minus Goji
Figure Fight. Round 1.
Price. Alright, so normally we kind of go over in a fancy schmancy way, like yen, USD, and then, okay, so no matter how you splice it and dice it, we have the Super7, which is going to be $85 plus minus shipping and handling and tax, so on and so forth. Okay, cool beans. The SH MonsterArts was like 14,000 and something yen at release, which I think was around $110, but US distribution price was about $140, I forget exactly, but no matter how you want to split it, because some folks will want to say aftermarket, which that's not the point of this section. It's to conceptualize how much each company put into the product for cost. So it doesn't matter. The SH MonsterArts, no matter how you try to spin it, is going to be more expensive than the Super7. So the Super7 is going to come on swinging with a right hook and knock the SH MonsterArts down a peg, so this way it gets a point on the board.
Round 2.
Scale. Here's kind of where we have a little bit of an issue here, and it's going to be a matter of scale. Now, I will say that Super7 is indeed trying to do their own thing, and this is a standalone Godzilla. He didn't have any enemies yet, though I suppose that you could flub the ride Ghidorah in here. Okay, that's cool. But keeping in mind that the 8-inch scale is not really the standard for kaiju collectors. It's going to be more so 6-inch or 12-inch for that particular scale, so on and so forth. So the Super7 does kind of stick out. But it's going to kind of be back and forth here. I would normally give this to the SH MonsterArts, but I really think that the ref should argue both contenders are just going to be standing in the ring, and neither is going to be on the board for a point for this.
Round 3.
Accessories and tie. Why? Because we're going to go into round 4 talking about articulation, and this doesn't count. That is not an accessory. Okay, so it's an accessory. No, I mean, there's no reason why the Super7 doesn't have a hinged jaw. So for there, considering there's no accessories here and there's no accessories there, or if you really want to, if that's a hill you want to die on, this is kind of a jank accessory and it doesn't mean anything. So we're even there. Now, articulation. Here's kind of where is round 4. Wow, we're kind of a sloppy jalopy here. Anyway, round 4 is articulation, and this is kind of one of the ones where if you've been chatting, in my Discord, or you've caught some comments, you can always find the Discord in my link tree, or bit.ly, the thing that pops up around down here. That is an actual URL, folks. Put it into the web browser. So the SH MonsterArts and the Super 7, I feel, if you really want to know the truth about it, aside from the small things like little toesies over here and some things for micro adjustments, they're effectively going to have the same range of movement for articulation. They're gonna have the same point. So they can T-pose, they can look over to the side just like this. We can have them both do that. It's not really going to be a problem. The SH MonsterArts perhaps does it a bit easier, and because of the extra joints, like I said, he's going to have the ability for micro adjustments here and there. So how is it really going to be scored? Because if you think about it, if they both effectively have the same range of movement, or they're able to strike the same poses, does it matter if we have one extra little bit of adjustment here in the bicep in order to like right down here just to be able to get Godzilla's movement a bit different? Does that matter? Do toe hinges matter, or ball joints? Do they really matter? I'm going over this in summary instead of doing just a quick run through of everything, because with this, they're kind of equal. So normally the ref should argue that this is going to be a tie, because if you want to, you can push Godzilla down just like this for the SH MonsterArts, right? Well, for the Super 7, you can pretty much do the same, right? Looking up, Super 7 can look up about that far, and so can the SH MonsterArts with head popping off. I'm glad that they both can do the same. Now, keep in mind that the SH MonsterArts does have the dorsal plates there that do move, and folks are going to say, well, that does substantially increase. No, it doesn't. We already went over that in my review. I mean, look at that. That's very similar. But here's going to be the issue where the SH MonsterArts is going to win. You can already say that, well, it has more joints, it should win, which I guess is the benchmark. But here's an issue with the Super 7, and this actually caused me to redo the figure fight once. So I talked about this in my review. It's going to be primarily at the shoulders and on the hips. Actually, you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. The sculpt does not have enough clearance in order to use some of the joints properly. You can actually see collision right there. Let me make sure that that is very clear. Okay? You can actually see collision when you go to move, and you can see right there some of the sculpt that is literally getting ground down because of just simply using the figure. So, at any time you pretty much see that sort of green, he's damaged. He's damaged. Okay? Your -1 is going to be damaged. And then, not to mention the tail, which, c'est la vie. So, when you have damage that is built in, that clearly is a bug. It is not a feature. Some parts may pop off. That's okay. Some parts in the Super 7 pop off as well. You can just fix that by putting the thing back on. I'm sorry, but the ref is going to have to call that is a big wound. Dorsal plate, again, to the Super 7. And the SH MonsterArts is going to be standing in the ring for a point in the 4th round, and we're heading into the final 5th round.
Round 5.
Sculpt and paint. All right, folks, so here's where we're going to be finishing up the figure fight. And if we're going to be talking about sculpt and paint, well, neither figure is really going to be winning here. The sculpt on both's really great. I'll go ahead and roll the usual pics and videos and so on, but yeah. So when it comes to the pros and the cons, realistically speaking, there's going to be a lot more cons to the visuals of both. Unfortunately, they don't match what was advertised. That is going to be an important factor in what comes into the final decision here. But in specific for the comparison between the two, the Super 7 is very glossy, and the paint applications don't really match the renders. We do have some heavy-handed dry brushing throughout the figure, and there aren't going to be all of the different browns and the tans, so forth, that were found on the renders that were advertised for the Super 7. Obviously, the paint for the head sculpts, not good for both of the ones that are included. c'est la vie. For the SH MonsterArts, likewise, the paint application is heavy-handed throughout. It looks more like he is dusted than anything else. I suppose a pro over the Super 7 is that it's more of a matte paint application. However, a negative is that if you look particularly at some of the spots, like maybe the back of the figure or the underside in some areas, the paint application really isn't completed. Like you're only going to have the front of the thigh completed, or the front of the foot and the bottom and the back of the heel, let's say. There's not going to be paint there. Otherwise, however, both figures are using CGI models, the renders, whatever you would call it, from the movie, and they were altered by respective artists, with Super 7 boasting actually having the director approve the final product, or at least the render that they used. Now we're going to go ahead and come back real quick, and the only other point here for the Super 7 that does go into the visuals a bit, as the sculpt does get damaged, it starts to turn green. Now, I think in reality here, if we're going to talk about which one is going to be the champion here and is going to deserve the point, then I think it's going to be a tie. But not how we're going to end things here. So like I made mention, both companies have promoted that they did use the film model for at least their reference point. It goes without saying that both companies modified the model that was used in the movie or their reference point for actual production purposes, because you can't just take a sculpt, you can't take something and just immediately put joints into it and cut it up, because then you're going to have issues with range of movement, whether or not something is going to look good. Like for an example here on the Super 7, when you move the arm down here at this hinge, you're going to have sculpt here underneath. So you are going to have to make some accommodations for the articulation. So again, both of these do not match the prototypes that were advertised. The SH MonsterArts does look notably worse, and the Super 7 isn't even what was advertised. Huh? All right, minus Goji backshots. Something to really keep in mind here is that we're not going to be talking about movie-specific accuracy. That's not it. We are going to use the movie accuracy sort of as like a reference point, if you will, but this is not accuracy to what was seen in the movie. This is going to be accuracy to the actual model, the render that was used to advertise the product, okay? So we know that the SH MonsterArts, it doesn't match. We know that the Super 7 doesn't match, at least in perception, okay? So we're going to already discredit that. What we're going to be talking about here is the render that Super 7 used to advertise the figure and the actual product, the physical product that is going to be in everyone's hands. So I would like to thank some folks who were able to send me some stuff for this comparison that you're going to see. It is going to range from other product, so this way you see that I'm not as Looney Tunes as I seem, other reference points and materials, and then I'm even going to have possibly a couple of few shots from the movie, some stills. A seed of a mighty tree was the source material for the version of the movie. If you know, you know. All right. So I do want to thank Boats Can Fly, same handle on Twitter and Instagram, Godzilla154 on Twitter and Instagram. And then we have Godzilla Master 84 who assisted as well. If you are looking at the SH MonsterArts, so this is a good point here of reference, we're going after what's called ceteris paribus, okay, kids? So ceteris paribus is a fancy term in research for basically all things considered equal. That means that we're going to take this example and just assume that it's equal, all right? So what we know to be true is that both companies had boasted that they are using the actual render and the model from the movie for their action figure, right? Okay, so then we know that they both had the source material available to them. Now, we know that the SH MonsterArts does not look like the prototype because, well, it just doesn't, but we're talking about the sculpt here, okay? So, looking at the Super 7 figure and looking at the promo pics and so forth and comparing it for this figure fight, I noticed something very particular, and this is actually a dorsal plate that I am very fond of on the minus Goji figure. Looking at the SH MonsterArts, there is this particular dorsal plate that is found here. Let's go ahead and just do another zoom in here so you get a good idea of what that looks like. We can see that it is going to be here. Okay, so this sort of little swoop up, this line here, and then a dip back down with some other spiky plates here, and that is going to be right next to this block. Okay, this block dorsal plate. So that is found actually on the final design as well. That's found on other figures like the Ichiban Show, that is found on the X Plus, that's found on plenty of other products. Now, if we're going to be taking a look at the Super 7, because that plate is found on the final movie model. If we take a look at the Super 7, so same angle, same difference. So here is the block, which is going to be the reference point that I talked about before. So here is the block and the reference point, and we look down here, and that is not present. That dorsal plate that sort of has that swoop up, the line, and then the swoop down isn't there. So if we're going to be talking about which one is going to be more accurate to the movie, the SH MonsterArts is going to be in all of its dusty looking dry brushed glory. Now, with that being said, you're thinking it's not that big of a deal. Well, here's going to be some other product that actually does have that present. And what I do believe to be the point is that they perhaps were using a different version of the model here, because the movie Monster series, I'm not able to get a super clean look at it in hand because I don't have it, and that's where some other folks come in. I don't believe it has that dorsal plate as well. So perhaps it's a different model, but what is going to be the most interesting here is that Super 7 indeed at some point did have this model to help with accuracy for the final product. It's very difficult to see on the actual colored version of minus Goji, but if you take a look at the minus color version of the figure, you will see as clear as day it is peeking out at the back. Now, if we are going to be taking a look at the figures also, you're going to be able to just say that we assume that the SH MonsterArts, despite Yuji Sakai making some differences in the final sculpt here, you're going to notice that there are going to be some sculpt differences. I know I said I wasn't going to go in super deep and in depth with all of the details and so forth, but let's see if we can just get at least a minimum, an even point here. You can definitely see that there are some differences in like the dorsal plate arrangements here and there, so that is going to be different. And then we take a look down here. We can see that there are differences here and there. This is stuff that's very, very minor, and in the grand scheme of things, does this really matter? Only if you are super duper into accuracy, but I'm only going to allege here because there are details that are found on the render that Super 7 promoted versus what they actually sold customers, and it doesn't appear that those details are there when what they had promoted and had promised, a figure that matched the movie files, in the movie, it isn't there, and it is a different version thereof. So I'm going to have to call it as I believe I'm seeing it here. This isn't what was advertised. I believe so. And because of that, down to the core, not only in the sculpt department, but also the paint, whereas the SH MonsterArts is only going to be missing that in the paint. We still have an amazing sculpt that was advertised. Albeit there were probably some changes, but nothing that's going to make you go, what? So to that point, the SH MonsterArts is bringing yet another point on the board to knock out the Super 7.
Final.
And with that, the figure fight is done and it is over. The Super 7 is going to be more affordable, and the SH MonsterArts does move and groove better, mostly because the Super 7 does damage itself as it does, and the SH MonsterArts, albeit, want to add this in there, paint-wise, neither of the figures look quite like as advertised. It actually does deliver the core shell of what was advertised. Super 7 appears to have not done so, but regardless, neither of them are really going to look much better than the other, so it's kind of a moot point. But at the end of the day, if you are looking for which one is going to be, by the tail of the tape, better minus Godzilla action figures, it would be the SH MonsterArts. But that being said, on a personal note, the best of the worst, I guess you might say, and that's such a shame because they both have such amazing potential, and let's be honest here, they could just be better, and we hate to see it. Now, that being said, folks, yeah, like I said, either or, who really cares, but there is going to be a clear winner of which minus Goji figure you should get. You're probably wondering, Steven, which one is that? Wait for the Haya? No! You just gotta... Oh boy. Woo, doggy. I can't wait to go over this one. All right. See you soon.